Hello and thanks for joining us. I'm Francesco Corsini from Lenovo. I'm BDM Director for Education, and today with us I have Stefan van Lankran, Deputy Head of SERI at OECD. Hello Stefan, thanks for being with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
And what I would like to discuss with you today are some insights, and to have some discussion around the challenges of digital transformation in education, what you have encountered during your research, and what we see in our day-to-day business, and try and understand how we as Lenovo try to apply our technology with a purpose to those challenges. So the first question comes from something that I've read in the Digital Education Outlook, and this is really about interoperability of data between local and national systems, as this is mentioned as something which is critical, and that possibly during the pandemic, the acceleration of technology in schools have made even more difficult. We've already entered the age of AI. Data will become more, data management will become more and more important. So how do you think, do you think that interoperability will become even more of a problem, or do you believe that education systems are going in the right direction? And one of the reasons I ask this is because from a technology and technology provider point of view, we've been providing solutions that fully benefit from single sign-on systems, for example, from Microsoft, from Google, open roster system, and we try to integrate every national standard where appropriate, not only for our products but also for the ISV, the software that we provide from third parties. So I would like to know your view and insights on this.
Well, I hope it will go in the good direction. I think it's interesting, we had the BET show, and what we are seeing is how diverse and multifold the solutions are, so we have hundreds and hundreds of apps and products, and they're all digital, so there is some level of compatibility between all of them, but they are all separate, and they tend to address relatively narrow issues, for many of them. And so there are two different questions. One, and I think that there has been a lot of progress with single sign-on solutions, for example, in terms of how do the users, the learners, the teachers access all of these different, technology tools that are available. Well, if you think of it from more of a policy perspective, and so one of the things that as a policymaker you would want to know is basically have information about the data of all of your different students. So typically countries have two different things for that. They have an information system, or an education management information system, or student information system at the system level, where they have a lot of information about, Francesco, Stefan, and everyone. And then you have schools that have learning management systems at a local level, and most of the time it doesn't communicate with the country level system, and this learning management system oftentimes doesn't also communicate with all the different tools which are connected with it. So when I say communicate, I mean how can we transfer the data from one to the next so that we have information. Imagine that I use an adaptive learning system in mathematics, for example. There is information about how I make progress, and in fact there is information about how thousands and hundreds of thousands of students make progress, but I cannot use that information, because it doesn't know anything about me, doesn't go anywhere upward. And so that's actually, if we think of how can we make a better use of all the information that we have within an education system, so that we can improve how we learn. We can learn from the data that are collected, the trace data, the telemetry, etc., and we can design interventions You know, how can I actually support Stefan to become better in mathematics, or how can I help Stefan not to drop out from school, or to do, we don't have that information most of the time, and that's an interoperability problem, you know, because even if we wanted to have this information, we wouldn't be able to make it go back to the right system. So that's still a challenge that people have to think about. You know, people are aware. It is difficult to solve. You know, people have tried. There has been many interoperability initiatives. You know, some, like in Australia, seem to have been relatively successful. Others have given up because it is difficult in practice to do it when you have so many legacy systems and different types of digital tools being in use at the same time in any education system.
Thank you, thank you. So still some way to go, but
yeah, but progress.
But progress. Thank you. So now I wanted to ask you a topic that is very important for us, and this is the responsible purchasing practices that OECD is promoting and supporting around device procurement. And specifically, I would like to ask you your view on how you think that professional development also impacts those practices, whether you see this as a key aspect of ensuring that the technology is deployed and used most effectively.
Okay, so I will answer, but then I will ask you what you think about it, and what is Lenovo's position on that. So on the devices, of course, you need to, it has to come with professional development for the teachers or whoever are going to use it, and it's a very important aspect. Most of the time, this professional development is really about using the device. When, if you think of it, in terms of teaching and learning and student learning outcomes, then it also has to be actually how you integrate it in your pedagogical practice. And you see much less professional development on that. There is almost no countries where there is any mandate to have in-service teacher professional learning on integrating digital tools. I can do it if I'm interested, if I'm motivated, but I don't have to do that. And I think that's important when countries or schools actually buy devices, that it comes with the digital learning resources that have to come with the device, and also the professional learning that has to come with it. We have a lot of different types of procurement policies within countries, and which have their upsides and downsides depending on what they are. Some countries actually centralize procurement, and I think it's especially for devices, there is something that is positive about it, because then you can negotiate prices much better. So from a cost perspective, it's much better for the system. The big downside is that you may end up recommending or buying things that the teachers or the schools are not interested in. And so that is one of the things that it needs to be balanced. Other countries leave it totally to the schools and the teachers to actually make these decisions, and we can hope that in that case, there will be a use of those tools and devices, and that they're going to purchase exactly what they are interested in. At the same time, perhaps they don't have the right information. Well, the cost may be higher, and perhaps they don't have the right information or evidence about what is most likely to work, or maybe it will increase the interoperability problem that we were talking about before.
You mentioned before.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And so that also has upsides and downsides. And I would say, in terms of, at the very least, what we believe at the OECD is that you shouldn't leave it entirely to actors in the system to make all these decisions, or let's put it a different way. It has to come with some kind of guidance, and people can make the decisions, but there may be intermediaries that support them in making the right decisions and thinking about how they're going to use all these different things and what has to come with the device when they do these kind of things. But what is, Lenovo has a lot of devices, and so what is your experience on that?
So I think that, first of all, when we look at professional development as a tool to promote sustainability, we have developed, in fact, an umbrella of products under the EdTech consulting, let me say, brand. And what we do offer is different levels of teacher professional development. So we offer, for example, a digital skills assessment to those schools or school districts that want to know more about the digital competency of their teachers. And we then collect this data, which is can be fully anonymized, but it can also be there can be some identifiable information depending on the requirement of the school district that is purchasing the service. And with the data that we collect, we ultimately provide a dashboard back to the school district to understand where they stand from a digital competency point of view. And we feel that this is, can be a good starting point to understand where each school system is sitting in their digital journey, and can, let me say, can help us build a series of recommendations and advices on the technology that they might need. And this process that starts from assessment can go all the way to the training of the teachers themselves, wherever there are gaps, not only from usage of technology point of view, but also on new pedagogical approaches to adjust their curricula. Now, we see this as a key initiative to sustainability. There is nothing worse than putting devices into the market that ultimately do not get used. Because from the device point of view, of course, we are making many efforts in making our devices more sustainable. One of the, and to do this, we also try to think outside of the box. One of the initiatives that we have launched called Waste to Wonder, or Waste to Educational Wonder, has some cutout lines on the boxes, on the cardboard boxes of our device, a QR code that can allow the kids, the students, to see some STEM-like activities that they can actually perform with the cardboard. So we try also and find innovative or different ways to minimize the impact, and where the impact has to be there to make something useful, hopefully, with it. So thank you. And another topic that I wanted to discuss with you is data governance. This is something that, of course, is very dear to us as a company. All our education-specific products, in fact, tend to collect data only locally, and only the entity that is deploying the product will own the data. There is no collection on our side. But something that I was reading and discussing with you previously is around how is there a possibility to use this data for research purposes, to make this data useful. And I wanted to ask you if you think there is a way to balance privacy and usefulness of the data.
So, it goes back to kind of the first question too, on how you can use some of the data that are available in the system so that, it helps to make good decisions in real time. So that's what we talked before. Then there is a second aspect to it, which is basically how do we at least, get something out of these data that are being collected afterwards, and so that's for research purposes. For research purposes, it's much easier in some ways because there is a long tradition of accessing, pseudonymizing, making, data anonymous and making sure that it can be used afterwards. But unfortunately, it is not all the data that, for example, when we did the OECD Digital Education Outlook 2023, we asked countries, so if you want to have access to the data that are collected within the learning management system, how do you do that? And the answer for everyone is, oh, we haven't thought about it, we don't do that. If you want to access data, it has to be the data from my country information system, it's part of my registry. So, there is this real challenge on how to unlock some of the information that are at lower levels of, let's say, closer to the learners and to the teachers, to actually make a better use of them. And in some ways, to do that, it doesn't require anything new. It just requires to use standard practices of, secrecy of, statistics, making the data anonymous, etc. One more thing I would like to say on that is, in many other sectors than education, the big, thing around data, because as people say, data is a new currency, of our days. So what people do is, how can I actually share the data that companies are gathering? And in the case of education, think of it, all this information is gathered in public environment, paid for usually by public money, and so why do we not have access to some of the information, or why can we not find ways to share this information so that, for example, in a kind of a competition policy approach, other companies can build something? Of course, you never share everything, you cannot, but how can we actually reuse this information? And I think, there are a lot of ways to do that, creating synthetic data sets, for example, and we could actually get inspired in the education sector based on what others are trying to do in other industries, to actually see how these things could actually be shared, And I already said that was my final point, but I have one more. And this one is basically also on the privacy and the governance, and perhaps, we have to keep in mind that, privacy is super important, and that's really a key aspect, because we need the credibility, we're dealing with children in many cases, etc. But we also actually need to use the data to make sure that other objectives that we have for education are met. One of them, for example, if we want to have an equitable or fair education system, we need to make sure that the algorithms that we use are not biased, and that they don't disadvantage some groups compared to some of the other ones. And if you want to know whether this is the case or not, you need to have personal information, at least for a subgroup of the people using that, And so we shouldn't make, privacy as the only imperative in our data governance, and we actually should balance different types of objectives. And that's really one of the things that we're just starting to experiment, and that we need to learn from others as well.
Try and find a way
Absolutely.
together to solve this. Thank you. And as we have talked about data, the last topic that I wanted to touch on with you is AI. Of course, it's everywhere at BET, and also outside of BET. So you mentioned the bias in algorithm. We've been helping publish a paper for those who are building AI models on how to understand and avoid the entry of bias into the models. On the other hand, we are faced every day with questions around privacy, security, safety of AI usage and AI models. And we know that AI is already in school, kids are already using it massively. So we need to try and find a way to allow them to use it in an equitable and safe manner. From a technology vendor point of view, we have just released some of our first AI PCs that allow you to run smaller models, small language models locally on your machine without need of cloud or internet connection. We have developed a software called AI Now that allows you to build your own knowledge library and use the on-premise, on PC AI to handle your data and interact with the model that you have built. So what do you think are the next steps for yourself, for OECD, for governments, for companies to ensure that we walk on the right path when talking about education?
So actually, I think that I commend you for what you've been saying. One of the things that if we think of it globally, if you want to have fairness, actually developing solutions where you can have a low data usage, that you can work with intermittent access to connectivity, that's really what is going to make it possibly available to more than the richer countries' people. So I think that's a very important aspect of it, which is merely technical. And I would say with generative AI right now, it works more or less. You can use a smartphone to actually have access, but you don't always have connectivity. And so that's really one technical part of it. Second thing I would say on that, if you want to make it more, I would say, universally available, and that's again for the developers of it, it has to do with cultural relevance, and so with bias. But so before I was thinking more of bias in terms of how it works for, let's say people who are not native speakers of a language, how it works for people who are from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, or for minorities of different sorts, etc. But we have to think, if we think globally, we have to think of how does it work for people who have a language which is not widely spoken, who don't have a lot of, like indigenous knowledge, which is not usually codified or not on the internet, given that, most of these models are trained on whatever is on the internet, right? So it's mainly English-speaking resources, So there is a question on how to work with, countries and groups and try to be perhaps more, perhaps we need to change a little bit the data sets on which all these things are being trained and create new data sets so that we get a bit more fairness in terms of access. And I think that's going to help for all the things that are around generative AI, which is actually usually now accessible to all. There is a different group of AI, different category of AI, which is not generative, and which is all the traditional AI in education. Things like adaptive learning systems, things like, a lot of assistive technologies which are based on AI. So for all these things, if we want it to be, usually those things are not available to all. They have to be purchased by schools, teachers, parents. And here, of course, you have a big risk of, the richer schools getting a lot of great resources while the poor schools don't get them. And so here there is a role for governments to actually try to equalize a little bit, the resources when it comes to AI resources and digital resources, more generally speaking. And so, it's a lot of, has to do with the political will of the governments to do that. We could see during the COVID pandemic that when there is a will, there is a way, and we can actually do a lot of things. And I think that, I hope, this spirit will continue, and now that we're going to integrate the idea that, in fact, AI and digital resources and digital tools are part of our modern education. And if we want to, have more equity and equality of, the learners, it has to be at least a baseline has to be accessible to most.
Thank you. So thanks for this concludes our talk today, and thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
It was very interesting.
Me.
Thank you.
Lenovo.